Hey, what's going on, everybody? Today is Juneteenth in the US, Wednesday, June 19th, 2024. And you are listening and watching the Daily AI Show live. With me on the show today are Andy and Junmi, and I am Beth. Brian is still traveling, and we'll see if Carl jumps in the door or anybody else does. It's Wednesday, and Wednesdays are our weekly AI news roundup show, and this week has been chock full. Also, just so you know, we don't share our stories beforehand, so we're not sure what everybody else is going to say, and that's a lovely discovery place for us as well. Okay, so on that note, Andy, let's kick it off with you. What are a couple of stories that you've brought?
Okay, yeah, I have quite a few to cover here, but I'll just touch on a couple here to start and then pass it over to you guys. So the first one is that Google and Gemini, which have increasingly become present in my view, like anytime I'm in a Google document or Google Sheet, there's Gemini over there on the right. And I'm starting to, lean on Gemini a little bit more than I did before. Well, they've introduced for their API users a new service called Gemini Context Caching. So what this is a feature where you can pass content to the model once and set those as a cache, and then refer to those cache tokens in subsequent requests. This prevents having to send through the context each time as token count, and that reduces the cost of your API usage. So this can be used for chatbots that have extensive system instructions, for example, and for repetitive analysis of lengthy video files, or recurring queries against large document sets, or frequent code repository analysis. So this cuts the cost of using Gemini 1.5 Pro in half as an API user. This is a very, very smart way for Google to attract users of their API and shift people away from some of the other large models that are being used for code generation or elsewhere. Okay, so there's a lot of people who are using AI for coding. It's one of the main features about this AI revolution is that coding is becoming possible for people who don't have great coding skills because of the facility that the large language models have to generate code. And also coders who know how to generate code are leaning extensively on this assistant that can do much of what they can do and simplifying their more routine work in code generation. Well, the most advanced capabilities of coding assistants are a big competition out there, and now a new open source coding assistant has reached state-of-the-art results, beating the other coding platforms out there that are more proprietary. And it's called DeepSeek. It's from DeepSeek, the company DeepSeek. DeepSeek Coder V2. And it scored 90.2% on the human eval benchmark. That's coders evaluating it against the other optional assistants now. DeepSeek Coder V2. Okay, so there's some other developments on the open source front that I'll talk about later, but that's on the coding piece.
Awesome. And we have Brian with us. Yay. The person who popped in the back door was not Carl. It was, in fact, Brian. Yeah, welcome. Brian, do you have news? We're just doing a quick, like maybe one story, two story, passing it around. Did you come with news? Ooh, we see you're freezing. So, Junmi, let's have your news.
Sure. I have a whole bunch of news, just like Andy said, all in the science realm. But we'll start with a couple of softballs here. Number one, GenSpark is a new AI powered search engine. So after reading up a little bit about these folks, they sound like they have a product that's similar along the similar lines of Perplexity Pages, the Arc browser, and even a little bit like AI overviews from Google. So what's really cool is this is all along the lines of what we've talked about in the past, where you search for a topic, right? And it will collect the various sources and then make a nice web page like experience for you to read and absorb that information. So that's sort of along that lines of personalized websites for people, right? So I thought that was pretty interesting that they came on the market.
Before you go on, let me add a couple of points of information about GenSpark. One is the announcement about GenSpark came in the context of they're receiving a seed round. Now, a seed round in venture funding is their very first funding beyond family and friends putting money into the thing. Their seed round was $60 million. So the venture capital entities behind this one, they look at this and go, wow, there's something special about this new search experience. And what I think is special about it is it's a multi-agent framework to synthesize content into this page. So agentic search is really what that's all about. Go ahead.
And then a couple more. I don't use Snapchat very often, but they've released their AR experiences technology, which in the larger scheme of technology releases, AR and VR, they belong to this umbrella term called XR, which is extended reality. And so if you've thought about or have heard about spatial computing from like Apple Vision Pro and things like this, Snapchat bringing on their AR experiences, these are overlays, looking through the camera, providing additional information or experiences and things like that. Snapchat's such a large platform that I think this is a real interesting way to get AR into everybody's hands, right? They're mobile specifically. You can use your phone to then have this AR layer added. So we'll see how that develops. And then one other short one, I think, before we move on is Sewer AI. So this is a company that was developed for quite a few years now in the AI space. But essentially what they do is they take all the data points that are used for inspections, sewer inspections, piping inspections, and things like that to create a much clearer picture of the state of any particular sewer system. And why this is important is the vast majority of our sewer infrastructure or our piping infrastructure is just post-World War II. That means, we've got number of decades old pipe system that, and anyone who's had the pipes burst in their house knows that this is a real pain in the butt to get fixed. So it would be great to see if we can predict when there might be a critical failure or something along those lines. So I thought that was an interesting thing to bring up.
Is that a poop explosion prediction engine you're talking about?
Preventive. It's preventive, right? So you could take the necessary actions before it all happens.
That sounds amazing. Yes, because those kinds of infrastructure fixes are things that are hard to detect, right? So we're saving money both in the detection and then being able to ideally fix it before it becomes a more poop explosion expensive problem. Nice. So Jimmy mentioned the Snap avatar. TikTok has also released their new AI suite called Symphony, and it's a comprehensive content creation suite. And it includes digital avatars as well. Like there's a whole avatar theme to this week's news, I think. But one of the things that the TikTok avatars will be able to do is dub into other languages, right? So it's automatically going to give you the ability to make a single piece of content and then dub it into, they said, 10 languages. So it's designed for marketing, right? It's a business suite to a certain extent, but ideally increasing ROI and user engagement on the platform, because now you're doing that expansion across speaking to people in their own language, hopefully. And yeah, they're looking to enhance global reach. There is also a story, speaking of avatars. AI Steve is a digital avatar who is running for the UK Parliament. This sounds like a joke news story, but it is actually not a joke news story. There is an actual Steve behind AI Steve, but it's really sort of putting in, like, in the US, we're concerned with deep fakes for political information because our election is coming up in November. And I think even if you're somewhere else in the world, you're aware of our election timeline. But no, so far as I know, we have no AI avatar political candidates, and I don't know if we could. Although corporations are people in the US, so we're not entirely sure about that. But it challenges political norms and, like, raises the question, brings some focus to what is possible, right? Even if it's not possible that they could serve or get elected, it's possible that they could run and be realistic enough that that people could vote for them. So there are ethical and legal implications. Um, it says the campaign will test the public acceptance of AI in leadership positions. And just based on our experience of people's response to AI in leadership positions, I do not hold high hopes for Steve, AI Steve running his chances of getting elected as a leader. But those are my two. And Brian is back. Welcome. Yay.
I was gonna say on that note, Beth, because I read that story too. That considering the upcoming election in the states, I'm not so sure. Maybe this will be the election that pushes me to want it to vote for an AI solution, considering my options.
I for
so
one, I for one would like to believe that most politicians who arrive at positions of power in the legislature or in the executive branches here in the United States would have an AI assistant that we could talk to, just to be assured that that person is well prepared. And I don't think many of them are, frankly. There are lots of them who are, but some of the people who are getting into political power these days are getting there on sensationalism and not on professional preparation for the role.
And let's be honest, I mean, there's millions and millions and millions of dollars on all sides. I'm not picking sides here. You know, paid to data companies that aggregate data and figure out exactly what needs to be said to get in power, stay in power, remain in power for 30 years, these kind of things, right? So unfortunately, as much as there's a lot of maybe benefit that could come from being more informed and AI helping that way, I also think obviously politicians around the world will use AI in order to even further fine tune exactly what they say. And as we know, it's going to get much, much easier to make that heavily personalized so that all four of us might get a slightly different altered version delivered to us that just piques our interest just enough. So it's gonna be very interesting as this comes. And I think this story is maybe more of a peek into that, like you were saying, Beth. I mean, it's not anything anybody's taking seriously today, but I am glad it's happening, and I'm glad it's making the news story because it's definitely something that's going to come into play more in the future and at more serious levels than maybe this UK story and stuff like that. As far as the news story for me, did you guys? I obviously I was having internet connections. I'm in a hotel in Austin, Texas, so I apologize for that. But did you guys already talk about? Not Sora, but Runway as far as their video. So I think that's a really interesting story. Runway ML sort of, it's not available. This is typical, right? We don't have availability to Sora. We don't have availability, and then you have other ones like it's Luna, right? That just came out with their video thing, and it's okay. Is it Luna? Is that what it's called?
Luma.
Luma with an M.
Luma. Okay, thank you. So anyway, what I want to bring up on this is it's more of a general news story on this, is that, again, I was listening to, I think I mentioned it last week, Ashton Kutcher, but I just happened to see the actual video footage of him talking about it. And he was saying he had access to a beta version of Sora, and that, it was sort of what I talked about last week. And a lot of people jumped all over his case because, the biting the hand that feeds them, so on and so forth. But, although we're only seeing glimpses of this, I think his point is the one that resonates with me the most, which is like, let's look at where we were a year ago and what the capabilities are, for any of these video models. And so he's like, what he was saying was, um, I'm interested to see when this has 30x the ability or power that it does today. And that's not actually that far of a leap considering where we were in the last 2 years in terms of, any sort of video creation or something like that. So it's not necessarily that there's like news other than what we just saw released from Runway ML. It looks to be in line with what we saw with Sora, what we've seen from coming out of China, what we saw with Luma. Although Luma, I kind of feel like from what I can see is the way I understand that one. Kyle Bernard on LinkedIn said, like, look, you got to go to ChatGPT and make a really good prompt. Then you got to go put that into Midjourney. Then go get the image from Midjourney. Then go make a really good prompt and use it in Luma. And that tends to work, and that's fine. That's fine for where we are today. I think for me though, and I was saying on his LinkedIn post yesterday or today, he's in Australia, so it probably was his today earlier, but I was saying, look, where I see the hugest impact on this is just, again, the speed at which people will be able to do storyboarding, to get greenlit for video, for movies and stuff. Oftentimes you hear somebody has a great idea. Your Matt Damon, Ben Affleck stories from way back when they had Good Will Hunting, and they worked on the script and worked on the script. Because you can imagine, two young, not working actors who were probably doing other odd jobs at that time. They certainly weren't famous then. They'd done little things here or there. But being able to write that script, and then to what Ashton Kutcher was kind of saying, they could have had their own vision before directors were involved, before other people got their fingers into it. Maybe they had a vision of what that movie was supposed to look like, and they would now, or we'll assume in a year, be able to create that actual video, movie, short story, whatever you want to call it, let's say a Good Will Hunting, and then be able to pitch that. Or maybe you'll have studios who say, hey, this is a good enough script, we're going to green light it to use AI. We're going to put $1,000 on this because that's nothing. Go ahead and create the AI version of this movie, and then we'll rate that. Maybe we'll show some smaller audiences with NDAs. I don't know. The whole thing is very, very exciting to me. I think it's really, really interesting. Obviously, it's going to be very disruptive to the industry, but I just wanted to bring it up because of what we saw with Runway ML, and then whether it was necessarily in the last 7 days. I just saw the video clip from Ashton Kutcher, and I understand why people are upset, but there's nothing about what he said that wasn't just more or less the way he was seeing it. He was more or less pointing out facts, not necessarily coming up with an opinion or something. So that's the one big news thing I have for this week.
Yeah, that's an interesting, and I'm glad you brought it up, Brian, because the aspects of where these could be touch points for AI video. And I saw Rachel Wood's post about the Runway Gen 3 release. But one of the things that I was taking note of was someone brought up CG and CGI, and VFX in general and things like that. And I think there's an easy move for VFX artists and VFX houses to take these tools and use it as their first pass, especially when you were talking about the storyboarding. So pre-visualization or pre-viz, animatics, those kinds of things that help tell the story and move it along to give people an idea of flow and what the imagery will be and things like that. Or even, like you said, the pitch decks. This is where it's an easy early entry point, right? Because now we're the today level of AI generated video is a few seconds here, a few seconds there, like, and at most we're talking like 20-30 seconds, which is fantastic, right? That's almost, you know, scene length if you're weaving them together. But that gives an opportunity for the current artist to use them in those fashions and start becoming more comfortable with using it as a tool and seeing it as a tool as opposed to a necessarily a replacement or threat kind of thing. I'm not saying that you shouldn't be cognizant of that and pay attention to it. You definitely need to. But I think there's a way that you can start using these tools to help your process along. Because I'm a big fan of lowering barriers. I would love to see the next batch of creators just getting their idea, visualizing their idea, and implementing it with little or no budget. Because that's where those fresh ideas
that vision. To support that vision that you have, there's another development in the news the last couple of days, and that's Google DeepMind's video to audio. So all of these very competent systems that can generate, you know, up to a couple of minutes of very rich video from text prompts, photorealistic video, action as described in the thing. Most of them are silent output. And so DeepMind has trained some models, and they're delivering now V2A, Google DeepMind V2A, that does from text prompts and looking at the video, it provides rich soundscape for the on-screen action, dramatic score, realistic sound effects, dialogue for the characters that are in these silent films. And this can also be applied to old silent films, so that instead of the subtitles, you know, there's going to be, you know, all the action, and then there's a realistic soundtrack, all generated by AI.
So what I think is really cool, and I won't spend too much time on this, is we're seeing all the different elements that we could put it together. So exactly what you said, Andy. You know, sound effects and other audio cues coming out of 11 Labs. Like, that's a new product that they've just released out to the public, right? They've been talking that for a while. Then there's things like Showrunner, which are more of a platform that they're talking about releasing so that you can develop your own AI shows and for release, because distribution's a really hard part of the entire ecosystem, right? That's where the large companies really have their foundation, is in the distribution and marketing arms. And if you didn't know, half or more of a film's budget or a show's budget is spent on marketing, right? It's marketing and distribution. So if you hear a film costs $100 million, well, 50 or 60 million of that went to distribute that film in theaters, in, you know, in whatever their distribution channels are globally, you know, domestically, and all those kinds of things. So there's all of these moving parts where I think AI can definitely help the broke filmmaker or the new filmmaker and create something that's meaningful and get in front of as many eyeballs as possible.
Yeah, and I'll just add one last thing to that, and then we can move on. Is, you know, look, from the how many movie scripts have probably been ruined by directors, right? Just because maybe a director wanted to see it a certain way and just really fundamentally change the movie. Now, we could also play the other side and say how many movies have been made great that were mediocre scripts, perhaps, that were made into Oscar award because of the directors. Obviously just as many, but I like the idea of having options. And I think what we might see is, you know, really good ideas, really good stories, be able to be workshopped, A/B tested, if you will, internally through 2 or 3 different directing, you know, abilities using AI, and do it on the cheap. You know, and then I'll just, for the last thing here, I'll just bring up my friend. So Inside Out 2 just came out this past weekend, and I went and saw it. Number one, I wanted to see it. My daughter wanted to see it. It was really cool. My daughter's 13, so she's the same age as the main character. So very, very cool. But my buddy Dave and his wife both worked on the movie. Dave, who's a childhood friend, was an animating director on the movie, and he was talking to me on the distribution side, Jimmy, about he was saying on LinkedIn or on Facebook, like, hey, please go support this movie in the theaters, specifically the first 2 weekends, because he was explaining how the it changes, right? How much the studio gets versus how much the movie theaters get after the first 2 weeks in the theater. Now, successfully, Inside Out 2 had a very, very good opening weekend. So I'm very, very happy for him and people at Pixar after there've been layoffs and things like that. It's a big success for them. I'm very, very happy for them. But to your point, Jimmy, with the marketing budgets and stuff, like how much of this can actually be helped earlier in the process with some of these AI solutions, not only to make it cheaper, obviously, to make the movies, but that A/B testing and working it through so that when marketing does come behind it with distribution and marketing dollars, that they're more confident that it's going to land because they were able to spend more money earlier in the process, perhaps with different variations or versions, or just simply saving money. So I'm excited about the whole thing. I'm not personally worried about like actors being out of work or anything. I think Ashton Kutcher is probably saying more what I believe, which is B-roll, exterior shots, setting up these types of things. A CGI effect that today is whatever is going to be ILM doing that back in the day with Jurassic Park, right? They're going to find a newer, cheaper way to do it, and people aren't going to have to build models anymore to make the dinosaur run. They're going to be able to do it in a computer. Okay, well, now they're going to be able to do it in a computer, but do it much faster. So it's the natural evolution of technology and movie making, I think. So anyway.
Okay. So, pivoting, I'm going to pivot to Brett Adcock, who we know as the CEO of the company that's building the Figure 01 robot. One of his pet projects, like near and dear to his heart, that he has been tracking and posting about for some time, is school shootings in the U.S. And for people in other countries, we have way more school shootings, like so crazily more school shootings than other countries for a variety of reasons that are political hot buttons. But what Brett is doing is he has announced that he is personally funding with seeding with 10 million, a company called Cover, and with a mission to prevent school shootings by detecting from afar. So it's not like a new kind of detector that you walk through. It's actually using AI vision to envision where a gun in the waistband and backpack, like it's that kind of technology, and it's like super ambitious and also like yay, right? This is one of those places where like, hey, this is an amazing use of AI for good if it could find and detect the possibility of shooters before they happen, right? The possibility of the mechanism that's going to enable a shooter, which means that they have something to shoot, right?
Do I understand this to be like, is it like using some sort of tech like a LiDAR, things that we're typically finding on a Tesla car, and it's using this sort of AI technology to scan? Is it a replacement for like metal detectors? I mean, do I understand this right? It sounds very cool, but I mean, obviously
It's
for sporting events as well and stuff.
okay. It's designing concealed weapon detection imaging scanners,
Oh,
similar
okay.
to airport scanners, but 10 times higher frequencies and up to 4-meter standoff distances. And it's as safe to human bodies as home Wi-Fi, right? So,
Okay.
and again, like we've been in those metal detectors, that's a one at a time kind of thing, right? There's like and this seems to be potentially a larger situation, right? Because AI can engage in more data and process more data at once than humans can, or than these these single things. And if it's at a distance of up to 4 meters, then you have much more ability to like run that process and like, okay, so that's someone we want to pull over. And I am also hoping that this shifts some of the human profiling that just happens, where whereas people sometimes we're paying more attention to certain kinds of people than other kinds of people. And AI, if it's looking for a concealed weapon, like we understand AI has bias built in, but if it's specifically looking for characteristics that would be like the shape of a concealed weapon, I'm hoping that removes a little bit of that profiling bias as well.
In another story that's about AI research being funded and organized by leading thinkers in the world of AI for the common good, Jeff Hinton, one of the godfathers of AI from Google Brain, and got some notoriety for leaving Google, saying that he was not confident about the sort of the ethical approach and the approach to protection of human interests in the development of advanced AIs. He and another preeminent researcher, Max Welling, have assembled a team and are doing a startup building AI systems to do material science for carbon capture.
So, Andy, give us a little background of why carbon capture is important.
Sure. So we've exhausted an enormous quantity of millions and millions of years of carbon sequestration that was created by, just the geologic evolution of all of the layers of sediment into that. And we were extracting that as oil and burning it and throwing carbon into the atmosphere. Okay. That's killing the planet. It is the most existential threat that we face, much larger threat and more certain than the evolution of AI into something that's, going to damage the human society. So we have to solve this problem, and there doesn't seem to be the political will to do that. AI is now being applied to material science. Maybe they can invent a certain kind of material that will automatically collect carbon from the air in an efficient way. Again, they're using AI to try to figure out the answer to that problem, but we need to pull carbon in the form of CO2 out of the atmosphere and lock it again underground. And that's what carbon capture is about.
Awesome. Okay. So keeping in the science realm, but going to a slightly different track, I've got a couple of science stories regarding AI. We have heard a lot of movement in AI in terms of being able to recognize different things, right? Interpret different things, whether that be various sensors that can replicate our senses and things like that. But now we've got a story about a university. I'm going to mangle this, but Karlsruhe Institute of Technology and the University of Duisburg-Essen have accurately identified a method to, or they've built an AI that will recognize emotional states, right? And in particular, their data set is vision or recording athletes, particularly tennis athletes while they're playing their games and things like that. So it has the potential to read emotion and reaction and what those players are feeling at the time, and this will give further insight into assessment of their emotional state, physical state, all those kinds of things. So I thought that was interesting in a reading more into how AI can interpret our own or reflect back our own states, which we all have issue into interpreting. Now, another one is more on the embodiment of AI, so robots. And robot training is a very intensive and expensive training process based on visions. And this is so that robots can navigate, robotic cars, autonomous vehicles, and things like that. This is all a heavy data side of things to develop how a robot sees the world around them and moves accordingly. So MIT came up with a way to, what I would call a shortcut in cutting off some of that data requirements by implementing LLMs to create a base input or a more agentic style of path determination. So they would use the LLM to break down what the steps are needed by the robot to accomplish, and then use the particular vision, right, of that are developed from the LLM to then train the robot to recognize, oh, this is being created. So it kind of has a simulated data kind of situation going on there. But this cuts down on the massive amount of just vision related data that's needed for the training. So this could speed up the development of robotics and things like that. And then finally, out of North Carolina State University, researchers have developed a technique that allows better mapping of three-dimensional space with 2D cameras. So sort of along the lines of imagery and stuff like that, is right now you can take a series of photos from all degrees and directions around a subject and weave them together to make a 3D image. We've also seen AI technologies that allow you to take a single 2D image and interpolate or guess what the 3D sides of it's going to be based on shadow, lighting, and all that kind of stuff. But this method sort of, well, what I would like to call like skews straight down the middle, right? They call it multi-view attentive contextualization. And it's basically a plug and play method of splitting the difference, right? Getting more information from the 2D images with less information without just doing it from a single image. So the research goes into far more detail, but that's basically the layman's look at that.
So I want to jump on that because related, not related, but related, you know, we make these loose connections on our new shows. Roblox has come out with 4D technology. They've been doing 3D technology for a while. 4D technology is about that spatial relation, like the spatial immersive interactive experience that so now people can build within that Roblox structure, not just 3D. So you can so that it's representing itself in space, but now you can engage with it in a spatial kind of way, and that's really exciting. Roblox has Roblox is an avenue or a creation system that a bunch of people engage with, right? So it's in its own sort of ecosystem, but it's big when it creates a new kind of technology that people can use and experiment with and create with. All right.
Great. I have two quick ones to end up with here.
Great.
The first one, I mentioned earlier about the open source coding assistant, which can generate code and is at the top of the leaderboard now. And that's DeepSeek's Coder V2. Well, you all remember Devin. Devin is different from just a straight coding assistant because Devin can do things in an agentic way. You can give it an objective and it'll figure out on its own how to go about developing the code and the platforms and the architecture and actually implement those. Well, a new startup just got its Series A round. So they had been seed funded before, but that led by Sequoia Capital. Sequoia leading around is a major thing because Sequoia is one of the big granddaddies behind the biggest names in technology that have emerged today. And so Sequoia investing in this company called Factory is very, very, very important to note. What is Factory doing? They're building droids for automating the software development lifecycle throughout. And those droids have been demonstrated to beat Devon, that came from this company Cognition. And now this company, with just $15 million of a seed round, valued only at $120 million, has demonstrated superior performance in this agentic code management and development as compared to Devon. So that's very important. And the last thing is, Beth and I have a fondness for this company, which I thought had kind of disappeared into the wings, called Open Interpreter. So Open Interpreter, their mission is to make it possible for you to control your computer with local tools, not going out to the cloud, but all local. Well, Open Interpreter just released Local 3, which they say starts the journey towards a new kind of freedom, personal, private access to machine intelligence right in your local environment and operating your local environment. So it's been upgraded. It can control your computer seamlessly and works completely offline and locally. Open Interpreter is a very important development. And both Beth and I have bought the small device that they offered early on, sort of like your start engine or your, whatever, we're investing in them. That is the interface with the code that will be on your computer delivered by Open Interpreter. And by the way, Open Interpreter is developed by a loose assemblage of over 100 developers around the world. They're all contributing to this open source project. And so it's also a test of, can open source really beat the heavily funded development efforts of these more proprietary companies that are building such things like Cognition?
Well, that's exciting. So I think we're going to wrap up. Brian, do you have anything that you want to say at the end? All right. So tomorrow, today is Wednesday. Thank you for joining us for the news show. Tomorrow, we are talking about Leopold Aschenrenner's situation awareness paper, site, project. I believe altogether it's a paper, but it's a bunch of different essays. If you're looking for information, you want to play along at home, go check it out on our upcoming event. It's really important. And Friday, we're doing our bi-weekly Circle Back show, where we'll revisit the shows from the previous 2 weeks, and we'll give you updates or tell you what we were thinking that we couldn't talk about on the show because we have so much to talk about on the show. And that's the end of our show, our news show today. Do all the things, like us, subscribe on Facebook. We have a newsletter, thedailyAIshow.com. Let us know how we're doing, and we'll see you tomorrow. Okay, thanks.
Bye from Austin.